Okay, so today we're gonna be reacting to animated stories. This one is about my dad is a rich poor mom versus rich dad. Okay, let's do this.
My dad had always been a ladies' man. You know, the kind of person who flirts with the supermarket cashier and wears a gold watch and chain. I don't know what my mom saw in him. She was kind and caring. After I was born, she gave up her career as a nurse to stay home with me. She made a lot of sacrifices for us. Unlike my mom, Dad was selfish. He spent most of his wages on himself, and sometimes it was hard for Mom to pay all the bills with what was left.
Damn.
She wouldn't speak up about it, though. She was too afraid of arguing with my dad. He's very intimidating. But the worst thing was that he was openly cheating on her. We all knew it. Sometimes he didn't come home until really late, if at all. And my mom often cried because of it.
Bruh.
I remember when I was 9. I got so sick of him, I screamed, "You need to treat Mom with respect." But he just shrugged and said, "She gets what she deserves. Every day I work hard to put food on the table. You better be grateful or move out and find your own job." Mom didn't say anything. That's how our family was.
Damn,
No one dared to speak out against my dad. We were all scared of him. I wanted Mom to leave, but she didn't. So part of me blames her for what happened next.
Exactly.
My dad's uncle died and left him a lot of money. A decent man would use it to build a better life for his family, right?
Yeah.
Not my dad. He didn't even tell us about the money. Instead, he told Mom he was leaving her and walked out with just a small bag of things.
Bruh.
I guess he figured he didn't need his stuff because he could buy everything new. Mom was absolutely devastated. I never heard anyone cry so hard. I ran over and hugged her, saying, "Don't worry, Mom, you still have me." But after they split up, she became very depressed.
Yo.
She had to find a new job, but it had been too long since she'd left nursing, so she became a cashier. She couldn't afford to pay the rent on our home, so Mom and I moved into a studio apartment and slept on mattresses on the floor. We lived like this for over a year, and I felt so bad for my mom. Dad didn't even try to get in touch with us. I was 13 when I was at the mall and saw my dad again. He was with a girl who was maybe 20 or something.
Bruh.
I was disgusted. Had Dad divorced Mom to date this girl?
No,
I
he
followed them
just
back to their
left.
car, but it wasn't just any car, but a brand new BMW X5. How did Dad get the money for it? I knew I had to find out where he was living and went to the police. I told them I didn't know where my father was, and the next day they gave me his address. I wanted to confront him and went over to his house. But when I got there,
Security.
I was too scared to ring the bell. Instead, I snuck in the backyard and climbed up a tree where I could see directly into their living room. At first, nothing happened. I started to get bored. But just as I was about to go,
What happened?
I saw something shocking. My dad came into the room with 2 girls. One was the girl I'd seen the other day, and the other looked so similar they could have been sisters. They were both in their 20s, while my dad was in his early 50s.
Bro.
I won't go into detail about what I saw, but one woman was wearing a bunny costume, while the other was wearing a schoolgirl uniform. It was gross. Back home, I wasn't sure if I should tell my
That's
mom,
called a rape.
but I decided she had the right to know. I told her about Dad's new house, but not the 2 women with him. I didn't want to hurt her feelings more than necessary. Mom said she didn't mind. Maybe Dad got all his money before you divorced. If that's the case, you deserve half of it. My mom wasn't sure, but I kept pressuring her until she finally hired a lawyer to find out what was going on. It took a few months for the lawyer to get access to my dad's bank transactions. But when he did, we discovered my dad had inherited that money a week before he told Mom he wanted a divorce.
Bro.
I hated him more than ever. The courts found out his uncle had left my dad $2 million and awarded half of it to my mom. However, Dad had already spent over a quarter of his inheritance. So after he paid my mom, he complained he only had $400,000 left. But my dad's shameless. Can you believe he actually came to my mom and asked her for forgiveness, said he wanted to try again. But this time, even Mom had had enough, and she told him to go away. Life's great now. We don't have to worry about money anymore. And my mom even started online dating to find a new boyfriend. She told me about a couple of her dates, and it sounded like they were much nicer guys than my dad. I'm so proud of my mom for finally having the courage to stand up to him.
Okay, guys, so this one is another one. It's about my sugar daddy's life. So, okay, let's do this.
It's hard when you're a single mom. I fell pregnant when I was 16, and my daughter's father said he didn't want to be a parent so young.
Yo.
So he dumped me when I wouldn't have a termination.
Wow.
I dropped out of school when I had the baby. I called her Tamsin. It was tough taking care of her alone. She didn't seem like other children. She needed a lot of extra care. When she was 5, she was diagnosed with autism, which explained her behavior, but it didn't make things easier for me. I was 22, no college degree, no job, nothing. One day, I was looking through Craigslist for ways to make money. I found an ad which said, well-off 45-year-old male looking for a lady that likes to be well treated.
Wow.
We can start with coffee and exchange resumes. Your time is valuable, and I'll make sure you don't feel undercompensated. Hoping for a drama-free, mutually beneficial arrangement. It was obvious he was looking for a sugar babe. I'd never seen myself dating an older guy, but I was struggling to find work and still take care of my daughter. So I decided to send him a message, even though there wasn't a photo so I could see what he looked like.
Bro, I wouldn't.
As I got
trust
ready
that.
to meet him, I felt really nervous. But I told myself it was going to be fine. I was doing this to build a better life for Tamsin. We met at a Starbucks, and he said his name was Mark. He was nothing like I expected.
Ugh.
He wasn't 45. He was in his 50s and overweight. Still, Mark was easy to talk to, so although I wasn't attracted to him, I figured we'd get on okay. His 2 kids were grown up, and he'd been divorced for years. At the end of our first date, he said, "We should go out for dinner. I know a few good restaurants." I still wasn't sure I wanted a sugar daddy, but I said yes anyway. The restaurant we went to was incredible. My food cost over $100, and it tasted amazing. It was
What
a
about
nice
your kid,
place,
huh?
but Mark was rather boring. I didn't really want to kiss him afterwards, but I did it anyway. Then he flew me and Tamsin first class to Hawaii. We stayed at a beautiful resort. It was lovely. But he spent so much money on me, I kind of felt guilty. Like I owed him something, you know? Still, at least my money worries were over. Mark and I started seeing each other, but he didn't want us to move in together. Instead, he gave me a condo in the city and just came by whenever he wanted.
It's all
He paid me a $6,000 monthly allowance. He even bought me a Lexus. I gotta admit, I loved my new life. I sent Tamsin to a private kindergarten and started taking some college courses. Finally, things were turning around for me. We dated for 2 years until he suddenly dropped me. I think he started seeing a younger woman, but all he said was, "I'm sorry, but I'm gonna end this." I didn't argue. I mean, it wasn't like there was a ring on my finger. But suddenly I had nothing. I hadn't graduated yet, and I'd never had a job. Who was going to hire me? I was so desperate. I signed up for a Sugar Babe website. This time, it didn't go so well. I met up with this guy. Let's call him George. He was in his late 40s, and from the moment I met him, I had a bad feeling. I was too desperate to care, though, so I started dating him.
Damn.
He wasn't quite as rich as Mark, but at least he gave me enough money to stay in college. But he was always demanding. I came to see him whenever he wanted, and he asked where I'd been if I didn't show up straight away. If I went out with friends, he'd get really jealous.
What?
I felt like he wanted to control me. When he gave me an engagement ring after just 3 months, I knew I had to leave before I was in too deep. I texted him saying, "Sorry, but it won't work out." George went nuts. He came over and tried to break down my door. I had to call the cops to get him to leave. Yeah, he was a controlling maniac.
Damn.
I should never have started seeing him. In the end, I took out a big loan to finance my degree and cover my bills. But it was worth it. Now I'm working in an office with a stable salary, and I don't have to rely on a man to take care of me. Do I recommend finding a sugar daddy? Absolutely not. It's dangerous. A lot of those guys are troubled and just want to control the women they're with. But maybe, if I was having money problems, I'd do it again. You just don't know what's going to happen.
Hey guys, this one is I fell in love with the maid. So yeah, let's do this.
Hey, I'm from Mexico, and my family is kind of wealthy. That's why we have a maid living with us who does the housework. She also has a daughter called Maria, who's 1 year older than me. We never talked much because Maria wasn't allowed to leave her small chamber unless she helped with the housework or had to go to school. I know we didn't treat her well, but a few months ago, she started giving me eye contact, and I always smiled back at her. I mean, she was quite beautiful. I even tried talking to her, but she was too shy and couldn't bring out a single word. But one Saturday morning, she came into my room to bring me breakfast. I told her, "Oh wow, that looks awesome. Thank you so much." That's when I noticed that she was wearing a rather revealing outfit. She put the breakfast on my bed, bowed down, and said, "Sir, can I do you any other favor?" Wow, I could see her bra, and it was so arousing. I offered her to sit down on my bed and eat the breakfast with me together. It was the first time we had a real conversation, and after a few minutes, she said, "It's very cold in here." I responded, "I'm sorry, the air conditioning is too strong, but you can come under my blanket." Suddenly, we were laying right next to each other, with my legs touching hers. I even put my hand on her thighs. Things were great until my mom came into the room. She saw us and said, "Oh my God, what are you doing? How can you sleep with a girl like her?" Maria was so embarrassed. She ran outside. Meanwhile, I tried to explain to my mom that we hadn't slept with each other. But my mom responded, "She only wants to get pregnant by you, so she gets our money." Wow, my mom always saw the worst in other people.
Exactly.
No wonder she was a terrible person herself. I mean, our maid was living with us for 5 years, and we still treated her like a worthless servant.
5
My family
years?
didn't even pay for Maria's school fees.
Bro.
But I liked her a lot, and we started seeing each other in secret. I still remember the first time she came into my room at night. She was still shy and only said, "Hey." I stood up and said, "Wow, you look beautiful." But she was so nervous, she couldn't even look me in the eyes. I had never felt more aroused. She was wearing a short black dress, and I couldn't help myself.
Okay.
I put my hand on her wrist and pulled her towards me. Then I grabbed her hair, pulled it back, and kissed her. This was the first of many nights we spent together. But then it happened. She told me she was pregnant. I was confused and said, "But we always use protection. How could this happen?" She said she didn't know either. But I had a suspicion. Maybe after we slept with each other, she had searched the trash and pulled out my protection.
What you mean?
But of course, that's just a suspicion. Anyway, it was hard to tell my parents about the baby. Both of them freaked out, and my dad even wanted to throw Maria out on the streets. I was shocked and said, "No, I love her, and I want to be her boyfriend. She isn't as bad of a girl as you think." I guess my parents were disappointed I wouldn't marry a girl from a good family. But I really didn't care. Maria was a lovely girl, and she was carrying my baby. However, in the first few months of our relationship, I learned that we were quite different. I don't want to sound arrogant, but Maria was less educated than me, and I didn't enjoy talking to her much. I still tried to be a responsible dad, but when I turned 18, I went to my first party. It was so crazy with all those beautiful girls. I stayed faithful that night and didn't kiss or sleep with another girl, but afterward, I started having doubts about my relationship with Maria.
Bro.
Maybe I wasn't ready for a family.
What you mean?
And things got worse when I went to university. There were so many pretty girls, and many of them were flirting with me. I just couldn't take it anymore. So I went to Maria and said, "I know you'll be angry, but I want an open relationship." She started crying and said, "No, that's not fair." But I responded, "I'm just too young for a serious relationship. I'm sorry." I knew I was a douche because Maria had no choice. She couldn't leave me because she had no money. She was dependent on me. And as horrible as it sounds, I kind of like that because it made me feel powerful. Well, after Maria had given birth, my
Dang.
parents rented us a small apartment next to my university where we moved in. But I partied often and even brought girls home. And yes, I took them into the same bed my girlfriend was lying in.
Ooh.
She would act as if she was asleep most of the time. But one night, I was drunk, woke her up, and asked if she wanted to join us. But she just started crying and ran outside.
Yes.
That ruined my mood, and I apologized to her afterward. Gosh, I knew I was such a jerk,
You're a
but I
douchebag.
still continued. One of my
You're a
favorite girls I
douchebag.
was dating was Mathilde. She was well-educated and funny. I told her I had an open relationship with my girlfriend, and then I asked her if she wanted to move in with us.
No.
She was reluctant at first,
no.
but finally agreed.
No.
It was so awkward when I introduced her to Maria. I said, "Maria, this is Mathilde. We've been seeing each other for a few weeks now, and I want her to become part of our relationship." I could tell Maria was angry. Of course, she wanted me all for herself. But that wouldn't happen, and a three-way relationship was still better than me breaking up with Maria. Then I pulled both of them close to me, and we all kissed each other. Gosh, it was one of the most exciting moments of my life. But it got even better afterwards. We also all slept in the same bed, which I loved, but they didn't get along so well and often insulted each other. Their conflict escalated when Mathilde accidentally used Maria's towel. Maria freaked out, and they ended up physically fighting each other wearing short pants on my bed. It sounds terrible, but it aroused me to see them fight over me. However, I still broke up the fight to make sure no one got hurt.
Come down.
In the end, Maria and I decided it couldn't continue like that. And now my parents are paying her $1,000 each month to rent her own apartment where she raises my daughter. I take care of my daughter on the weekends, and I really enjoy being a dad. But university is more important right now. So I can find a good job one day and provide well for both my daughter and Maria.
Ooh,
A long time ago, I found a little baby monkey on the side of the street. His mother was nowhere around, so I decided to take him home with me. We were
We don't have
really poor,
monkeys.
so to feed him, I had to starve myself. But he kept growing bigger and bigger, which meant he needed more and more food. I was getting so thin. I was close to death,
Dang.
and my mom forced me to let him go. I was
did you
crying
get
as I
India?
opened the door, and he ran outside. I felt like I had lost a good friend. But after a few hours, I heard a knock at the door.
Knock, knock.
So, I opened it up, and there was my monkey friend again. He was holding 4 bananas and gave one to me, one to my sister, and one to my mom.
Here.
Of course, we thanked the monkey and told him to go get more bananas. But this time he came back with 1 papaya and 1 mango. We figured he must have stolen them from the market. Well, this went on for several weeks. But one day, he came back with a little gold necklace. It was beautiful. So the next day, I gave it to a girl in my class named Ananya. She was even poorer than we were. Her mother had died, so she had to work as a maid for my evil classmate Champak after going to school all day. Champak treated her like a servant. He made her carry his books everywhere. And he loved barking orders at her in front of the whole class.
Dang.
I put the necklace around her neck, and she looked so beautiful. She gave me a kiss on my cheek and said, "Thank you." But the next
want a
day,
monkey
she
now.
came back crying.
What happened?
She said Champak took the necklace from her and accused her of stealing it. He was really mean to her about it and punished her by making her scrub his room with a toothbrush.
Bro.
I wanted to fight Champak. I wanted to end him. But he was as strong as a grown man. Besides that, his father was powerful and could easily take revenge on my mom and sister. He could have done terrible things to them. I was devastated and went home feeling helpless. But then, I saw my monkey bring us more bananas, and that gave me an idea. I'd train him to steal from Champak's home. Maybe he'd even find some valuable stuff to bring me.
Yo, what is
To train him, I hid a fake golden wristband around our house. Anytime he found it, I rewarded him with a little bit of chocolate. Once the monkey was well trained, I took him to Champak's place. There was a huge wall around it. But that was no problem, because my monkey friend could climb it easily. He jumped from the wall onto the house and went in through a window. I didn't see the monkey for several minutes, and then I heard a scream coming from inside the house. I was getting nervous, but then my monkey came back climbing down the wall, and he was carrying a gold necklace with a beautiful stone.
Monkey
He gave
rapper.
it to me, and I stashed it in my pocket.
It's an Indian
I started
rapper.
running toward home, but my stupid monkey went back inside Champak's house.
Don't call him
While I got
stupid.
home safely, my monkey didn't make it.
No!
The next day, I went back to Champak's house to look for my friend.
Monkey.
There, I saw a poster.
What the
It
frick?
said,
If
"If you want this monkey, give us back our jewelry." That monkey had been my friend.
Damn.
I loved him very much, and I hated to lose him. But the jewelry he'd given me was worth enough to get Ananya away from Champak's family. So, my mom and I went to another city to sell the necklace safely. We took the best offer and came home with 60,000 US dollars. That's a huge amount of money in my country. It was enough that my mom and I could buy a small house. We invited Ananya to live with us for free, and she seems a lot happier
God.
since she became a part of our family. At last, I want to thank my monkey friend. Thanks to him, we can live a comfortable life.
Rest in peace. Okay, so guys, this animation is I followed my crush to the basement. Okay.
Trying to get home as quickly as possible when I noticed my crush James walking onto the school grounds. I didn't want him to see me like this. I was soaked to the bone, looking like a drowned rat. But I had to know what he was up to. What if he was breaking into the school? I decided to follow him. And at one point, I swear, he turned around and looked right at me. I didn't know if I was seeing things, but it even looked like he smiled at me. Wait, did he want me to follow him? Suddenly, I felt brave. I was going to tell him how I felt. The moment I'd waited for my whole life had arrived. But then I saw him climbing into the tornado shelter, and that should have been my first warning not to keep following him, because things were about to get super weird. Before I unleash my crazy story onto you, click like and subscribe to stay up to date with all the madness that My Story Animated has in store for you. Okay, so there I was, climbing into a tornado shelter after my crush, with absolutely no plan of what I'd do next. I was acting purely on impulse, and it felt amazing. I felt sure he knew I'd climbed in after him, but I couldn't see anything, so I used the flashlight on my phone and realized he'd already gone down the stairs. The rain was really pouring now, so I closed the lid. The last thing I wanted was to flood the shelter, not on a special night like tonight. I'd never been this close to James before, just the two of us alone. Except we weren't alone. As soon as I closed the lid, I heard a girl's voice. No! I started panicking and decided this had been a stupid idea. I pushed the lid to climb back out, but it wouldn't open. No matter how hard I pushed it, it didn't budge. Oh my gosh, I was stuck. If it had just been me and James down there, it would have been quite exciting. But suddenly I heard a kissing sound and I realized my worst nightmare had just come true. I was stuck in a tornado shelter with my crush and his girlfriend by the sounds of things. I didn't want them to know I was there, like some creepy stalkers, so I tried to keep as quiet as possible. I could hear them laughing, and then the girl said, "Did anyone see you come in here? I hope we didn't get caught." And James replied, "No, I don't think so. Oh no, wait, there was a girl from my school, but she wouldn't say anything. She's such a loser." At that, I had to cover my face. I wanted to cry. It felt like he'd shoved a knife through my heart, and then I felt angry. I had to get out of there. This was literally the most embarrassing situation to ever be in. And what would my parents think when they found out? I gave the lid one final push, but I pushed too hard. The next moment, I lost my footing and was rolling down the stairs. I landed with a thump and blacked out for a second. When I opened my eyes, James and his girlfriend were standing over me. They didn't even ask me if I was okay. James just looked down at me and said, Did you follow me here?
What are you playing at? Then he turned to his girlfriend and said, "Come on, babe, let's bounce." Then they just left me lying there and headed up the stairs. I was about to tell them that we were trapped down there, but they'd soon discover it for themselves. I could hear James bashing on the lid of the shelter, but obviously it wouldn't open. And then he shouted down to me and asked if I'd done this and if I thought it was funny. No, James, I did not find this funny. I wanted to shout up at him. Gosh, what would he say if he knew how much I wished I were his girlfriend and not that dumb blonde girl? Then he started shouting about how he had to get out ASAP because the next day was his big football game that was going to guarantee him a scholarship to a top college. He said he had to get it, otherwise he'd be stuck in this stupid town forever.
Oh no, this was a disaster, and it was only just the beginning.
I sat up and looked around with my flashlight on my phone and realized there was literally nothing down there
Except for some sandbags.
Oh no, this was a disaster, and it was only just the beginning. I sat up and looked around with my flashlight on my phone and realized there was literally nothing down there except for some sandbags and an old scratchy blanket that looked like 1,000 bugs might be living in it. And then I realized I was shivering, like properly freezing cold. My phone was on 10%. Not that it mattered. There was absolutely no signal down there anyway. I didn't even have a bottle of water on me, and by the looks of things, James and his girlfriend had nothing either.
Oh man. I held my breath as they came down the stairs. I was so scared of what they'd say to me. They were arguing, and James's girlfriend came right up to me and said, "This is all your fault. You've ruined everything."
Truly, that felt like the most awkward moment of my entire life. James told her to try and calm down, and I learned her name was Amy. She must have gone to another school because I'd never seen her before. Neither of them had signal either, and soon they started screaming for help. I didn't want to tell them it was pointless. The rain was so loud. No one would hear us, even if they were right above us.
Wow.
Eventually, I told them I was sorry, even though it wasn't my fault. I lied and told them I'd been trying to shelter from the rain because I'd forgotten my umbrella, but Amy didn't buy it. She said, "Yeah, right. You're clearly a stalker. Do you get kicks out of watching other people making out or something?" James said you're a loser, and he wasn't joking. Look at you. If I hadn't already been underground, I'd have asked the ground to swallow me up. No one had ever been so mean to me before. After that, it was really uncomfortable, and all of us were in a bad mood. Soon, it became obvious we'd all have to spend the night down there. So I found a corner as far away from Amy as possible and lay down. I was still shivering and thought about using the insect-infested blanket, but Amy had already grabbed it. There was no way I'd fall asleep. I was so thirsty, and even though the shelter luckily had a small toilet, there was no sink, which meant no running water. I'd have drunk the rain earlier if I knew this was going to happen. I covered my ears because I was afraid I'd hear them kissing, and eventually I must have fallen asleep because the next moment I found myself waking up to hearing a rustling sound. I looked over at Amy, and even though I couldn't see anything, I knew she was eating something. I could hear her. I couldn't believe she had food with her and wasn't sharing it. Did James know? I should have said something, but I was too scared. I'd already caused enough trouble. Finally, morning came, and by then my phone was at 2%. Soon, I wouldn't even know what time it was. I was bursting for the toilet, so I went to use it, and of course, Amy shouted at me and said my peeing was too loud and had woken her up. Then I noticed there was a light switch outside the toilet. I clicked on it, not expecting it to work, and suddenly the whole shelter was flooded with light. Amy quickly pulled the blanket up and told me to look away. Oh my gosh, were they not wearing clothes? Then Amy just laughed and said everyone knows that body heat is the best way to survive in cold weather. Ew! Once they got dressed, I realized how pretty Amy was, and it really annoyed me. How could I have thought James would ever be interested in someone like me when he had Amy? I ran up the stairs and
Tried to push the lid again, but then I just sat there waiting for people to arrive at school. Then I'd scream my head off. Plus, I didn't want them to look at me. I felt so insecure about my running clothes, and I hadn't even shaved my legs. I didn't want James noticing. I could hear the school bell and feet walking over us, but no one heard me scream. How long would we be down here? James was complaining about being hungry, and Amy too, but I knew Amy had eaten something in the night. She was a liar. We started looking around the place to see if we could find anything, and James suddenly sounded happy. Under the sandbags, he'd found some old bottles of water. The water looked disgusting, but I'd have drunk anything by that point. Both James and I downed like a liter each, but Amy refused. Suit yourself, I thought. Then about an hour later, I started getting a weird pain in my stomach. Oh no. There was no toilet paper. This couldn't be happening. I had to run and almost puked my guts up. And I wasn't the only one. James raced in after me, and at one point, we were both lying on the floor, taking it in turns to vomit. Not exactly what I had in mind for our first date together. That water must have been 20 years old or something. Amy got seriously annoyed and even tried to drag James out of the bathroom. Was she jealous? And then I noticed an empty soda bottle behind the toilet. Had Amy secretly had a bottle of soda and not told us? How selfish. That first day seemed to fly by. Most of it spent in the bathroom, of course. By the end of the day, I'd almost lost my voice from screaming for help. Would we be stuck down there forever? And then nighttime came, and James and Amy got into a huge fight. Secretly, it made me happy to see them argue. James deserved better. He was super upset that he'd missed his football game, but Amy just kept saying he could go to college with her and then they'd never be apart. And James got really angry and said he didn't want to go to her college. Then the whole room went silent. It was tense. I didn't know what to do, so I just stayed quiet and pretended to be asleep. A while later, I heard someone saying my name. I opened my eyes and could see James. He said he could hear my teeth chattering and that I should come and share their blanket. But if Amy woke up and saw me, she'd go mental. I didn't care about her, though. James was actually being kind of nice to me for the first time in my life. I couldn't lose my chance. So I climbed under the blanket next to him. Our legs were almost touching. And of course, that woke Amy up. And when she saw me, I thought she was going to explode. James wanted to keep the peace, so he snuggled into her and left me lying there all alone. But I couldn't stop thinking about the moment we just shared. And during the night, I decided to try and get closer to him. I rolled over until I was almost right at his back. But then I heard something. They were kissing. I was watching them, wishing it was me he was kissing. I couldn't stop staring, but suddenly, Amy opened her eyes and caught me watching.
When you have no competition, it's obvious. Just like the Boat 24 lineup with no artificial flavors or sweeteners. There's no competition.
James, but James said I was asleep and that they should get some sleep too. But James didn't go back to sleep. He waited until Amy was snoring next to him, and then he reached out his hand and grabbed mine. I felt like my heart was going to explode, and I so badly wanted to get closer to him, but it was too risky. There was always the next night, right? So we fell asleep holding hands, and I couldn't stop smiling. In the morning, though, I was lying there all alone. When Amy got up to go to the bathroom, I smiled at James, and he smiled back. But then Amy came out and saw me and said, "Freak, stop staring at us like that." I thought James would stick up for me, but he didn't. He was acting like nothing had happened between us. The rest of that day was kind of weird. We just sat around quietly. At one point, James almost fainted. I mean, we were all starving. I was so weak, I just kept napping, and when I woke up from one of my naps, James and Amy were eating biscuits. Where did they get them from? I could almost feel the saliva pouring out of my mouth, and I assumed Amy would offer me one, but she didn't. They ate them all, and after that, I didn't speak to either of them. I was so mad. I couldn't sleep that night because my stomach was rumbling so loudly. But once Amy had fallen asleep, James reached into his pocket and handed me a biscuit. I swear I almost kissed him right there and then. This was why I had a crush on him. He was actually a good guy, even if he had a demon for a girlfriend. For the next few nights, we got into a bit of a routine. After Amy fell asleep, we'd lie there and hold hands. And one night, James came right up to me, and I could tell he was about to kiss me. But Amy started murmuring in her sleep, and he quickly moved over to her and held her. It drove me crazy. After we'd been down there for like 6 days, things were really starting to smell. The toilet, my clothes, it was nasty. And still, James and I hadn't shared a kiss. But for some reason, Amy still looked good. That day I noticed she didn't get up. It was like she'd given up on shouting for help, but it bothered me. Why should she get to sit there and chill? So I told her I'd just seen a huge spider, and I've never seen her run so fast. She raced up the stairs to where James was, and I immediately went over to where she'd been sitting. I just had this feeling she was hiding something, like another pack of biscuits. But I found something much bigger. Under where she'd been sitting was a loose part of the floorboard. I lifted it up and couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was so much stuff down there. Beauty products, food, a battery pack, even clothes. Oh my gosh, what was going on? I didn't have time to put the floorboard back before James appeared to find the spider. I whispered that Amy had been hiding stuff. James came running over and pulled out her phone. He knew her password and typed it in quickly. Then he saw some messages that said things like, I need to find a way to stop him going off to college. I'm scared he'll leave me. As he was reading them and I was eating one of her secret chocolate bars, she came down the stairs. What are you doing? She screamed. But it was too late. We'd caught her red-handed. She tried to grab her phone back from James, but he wouldn't give it to her. Eventually, she broke down and said that she didn't want James to leave her for college, so she'd planned this. But she had only meant for them to be stuck down there for 1 or 2 days. Then she said I'd ruined it all by turning up and getting them locked in here. But there was something else. While she'd been talking, I'd been digging around, and inside a pair of her socks was a key. I held it in my hands and watched as James went crazy at Amy. He said he couldn't believe he dated such a psycho and that she'd officially ruined his life. Then the best part of all, he turned to me and apologized. He said he was sorry he'd treated me so badly, but actually he'd realized how amazing I was and had enjoyed our sneaky hand-holding sessions while Amy slept. At that, Amy went berserk. She ran towards me and I quickly jumped away. Then I watched as she dug around inside her secret hiding place. Looking for this? I asked, swinging the key in my hand. Then I turned to James and said, she's been hiding this key the whole time. Before Amy could get to it, I ran up the stairs and undid the lock. James was right behind me, and we both climbed out and collapsed onto the ground laughing. We were free. As Amy climbed out, I thought she was going to kick me or something, but she just stormed off. And James shouted after her, that's right, keep walking. I never want to see your face again. Finally, she was gone, and James turned to me and gave me the biggest kiss ever. We could see the janitor running towards us, and before all hell broke loose with our parents about where we'd been for the past week, James asked for my number, and now we're about to go on our first proper date. The worst week of my life just became the best week.
Okay, guys, make sure to hit the like and subscribe for more of these and turn on all notifications. Peace.